"Sir, can you bury my sister?" the little alien boy asked. But what the human did next? The blizzard on Icium had raged for 23 days straight, trapping Michael Anderson in the alien settlement of Frosthold. He stared through the viewport of his temporary shelter, watching ice particles dance in winds strong enough to strip the paint off a shuttle. His combat suit hung on a rack nearby, a hulking mass of gray steel plates and thermal inserts that had kept him alive during his emergency landing. "Fucking wonderful," he muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. The settlement's inhabitants, blue-skinned humanoids called Navidians, had given him shelter but kept their distance. Fine by him, Michael wasn't here to make friends. He checked his emergency beacon again. Still transmitting, still no response. The Terran Alliance would find him eventually, but with the storm interfering with communications, it could be weeks, maybe months. A knock at his door broke his brooding. Unusual. The Navidians typically left notes or sent messages through the settlement's rudimentary communication system. Michael opened the door to find empty space, then looked down. A small Navidian child stood shivering in the doorway, no more than 5 years old. His bright blue skin was several shades paler than normal, and his snow-white hair was matted with ice. Tears had frozen on his cheeks, and a thin scarf fluttered around his neck. But what froze Michael's blood wasn't the boy's appearance, and it was what he carried. Bundled in gray fabric was the tiny form of an infant, motionless and blue-white. "Sir," the boy said in halting standard, his voice trembling from cold and grief, "can you bury my sister?" Michael's throat tightened. He'd seen death before, caused plenty of it himself in the border wars. But this... "Where are your parents?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Mother went to Star's last moon cycle," the boy whispered. "Father never came back from ice fishing. Just me and Lena now. But Lena's cold. Won't wake up." Michael knelt down, his massive frame dwarfing the child. With gentleness that surprised even himself, he took the bundle from the boy's arms. The infant was stiff, her skin like ice. The brutal Icium winter had claimed another victim. "What's your name, kid?" Michael asked. "Taro," the boy replied. "I'm Michael." He glanced at the howling storm, then back at the child standing alone in the doorway. Something shifted in his chest, an unfamiliar ache. "Come inside, Taro. It's too cold out there." The boy hesitated and stepped in. Michael closed the door behind him. "I'll help you bury your sister," Michael said, placing the bundle carefully on a table. "But not until the storm breaks. We can't dig through the permafrost right now." Taro nodded, his large violet eyes fixed on his sister's body. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked. Another nod. Michael rummaged through his rations, finding a protein bar that was compatible with Navidian biology. He handed it to the boy, who devoured it in seconds. "When did you last eat?" 2 days, Taro mumbled. "Shit," Michael whispered. "Where have you been staying?" "Our home." But the heater broke, got too cold. Michael looked at the child, really looked at him. Beneath the dirt and frost, his clothes were tattered. His thin frame spoke of neglect that predated his parents' deaths. "You can stay here," Michael said, the words coming before he'd fully thought them through. "Until the storm passes. Then we'll find someone to look after you." Taro's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah," Michael replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Really?" That night, Michael fashioned a small bed for Taro from spare thermal blankets. The boy fell asleep almost instantly, exhaustion claiming him. Michael sat watching him breathe, the rise and fall of his small chest a reminder of how fragile life was on this frozen rock. He looked at the bundle containing Taro's sister, which he'd wrapped in a preservation sheet from his medkit. In the morning, he'd find a proper container for her, something dignified. Michael had never considered himself a compassionate man. The border wars had burned most of that out of him. But watching the small alien child sleep, knowing he was completely alone in the world, stirred something Michael thought long dead. Just until the storm passes, he told himself firmly, then he's someone else's problem. But even as he said it, he knew something had changed. The walls he'd built around himself had cracked, just a little, letting in the cold, and something else, something warm. Michael woke to the sound of something crashing outside. The emergency lights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging his quarters into darkness. "Shit," he muttered, immediately alert. The temperature in the room had already dropped noticeably. A small whimper came from the makeshift bed where Taro slept. The boy sat up, violet eyes wide with fear, reflecting what little light came through the viewport. "It's okay, kid," Michael said, his voice steady. "Power outage. Happens in storms like this." He moved quickly, pulling on thermal layers and grabbing his emergency kit. The combat suit would be overkill indoors, but he strapped on the thermal gauntlets and boots. His military-grade flashlight cast harsh shadows as he checked the room's temperature monitor. -15 and dropping. "We need to get somewhere warmer," Michael said. "The settlement must have emergency shelters." Taro shook his head. "The big building has backup power, but Elder Nox doesn't like strangers." "Well, Elder Nox is about to get a crash course in human diplomacy," Michael replied, wrapping Taro in thermal blankets. "Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "I can walk," Taro said, though his thin legs trembled as he stood. Michael nodded, impressed by the kid's resilience. He carefully placed Taro's sister's body in a preservation container he'd fashioned from his medkit components, then secured it in his pack. "We'll keep her safe," he promised Taro, who watched with solemn eyes. The corridor outside was pitch black and already freezing. Michael's breath clouded in front of him as he held Taro's small hand, guiding them through the darkness. Other residents were emerging from their quarters, their blue skin almost luminescent in the gloom. "The central hub is this way," a female voice called out in accented standard. Michael turned to see a Navidian woman gesturing down the corridor. Her white hair was pulled back in intricate braids, and unlike most Navidians, she looked directly at him without averting her eyes. "Thanks," Michael replied, surprised by her directness. "I'm Lacey," she said, falling into step beside them. "You're the human everyone's been whispering about." Her eyes fell to Taro. "And who's this little one?" "I'm Taro," the boy answered before Michael could speak. "He's helping me bury my sister." Lacey's expression softened. She knelt down to Taro's level. "I'm sorry about your sister, little one. And your parents." "Gone to the stars," Taro whispered. Lacey looked up at Michael, something like respect flickering in her eyes. "You're helping him?" "Just until the storm passes," Michael said automatically, though the words felt hollow now. They reached the central hub, a domed structure at the settlement's center. Inside, hundreds of Navidians huddled together for warmth. Emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow over everything. At the center, an older Navidian male was barking orders. "That's Elder Nox," Lacey whispered. "He's traditional, doesn't trust outsiders." "Fantastic," Michael muttered. As they entered, conversations hushed. Eyes turned toward them, toward Michael specifically. The elder stopped mid-sentence, his gaze hardening as it landed on the human. "The off-worlder should return to his quarters," Elder Nox announced loudly. "This shelter is for our people." Michael felt Taro's hand tighten in his. The boy was shivering despite the blankets. "With all due respect," Michael replied, his voice carrying across the room, "your people include this child, who will freeze to death in unheated quarters." The elder's eyes narrowed. "The child can stay." "You dash. "The auxiliary power couplings are failing," a Navidian technician interrupted, rushing into the hub. "We have maybe an hour before this building loses heat, too." Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. Michael assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. A settlement this size would have backup generators, probably buried to protect them from the elements. "Your main generators, where are they?" Michael asked the technician. "Northern quadrant, but the access tunnels are probably blocked with ice by now," the technician replied. Elder Nox scowled. "This is not the off-worlder's concern." "It is if we all freeze to death," Lacey countered, stepping forward. "He's wearing a Terran combat suit. Those things can withstand temperatures that would kill us in minutes." All eyes turned to Michael. He sighed internally. So much for keeping a low profile. "I can help," he said simply, "but I'll need a guide who knows the access routes." "I'll go," Lacey volunteered immediately. Elder Nox began to protest, but the technician cut him off. "We don't have time to argue. The human's right. We'll all die without power." Michael knelt beside Taro. "I need to go fix something." Will you be okay here for a little while? Taro nodded solemnly. Will you come back? The question hit Michael harder than expected. Yeah, kid, I'll come back. As he stood, Lacey was already gathering equipment. Their eyes met, and she gave him a small smile that seemed to say, "Ready when you are." For the first time since landing on this frozen rock, Michael felt something besides irritation and impatience. A sense of purpose, and maybe something else he wasn't ready to name. The generators roared back to life under Michael's hands, sending vibrations through the frozen maintenance chamber. Beside him, Lacey let out a whoop of triumph, her breath clouding in the still frigid air. "I can't believe you fixed it that quickly," she said, admiration clear in her voice. "Our technicians have been struggling with these systems for cycles." Michael shrugged, wiping grease from his hands. "Just needed to bypass the frozen relays and reroute through the secondary circuits. Basic stuff they teach in Terran military training." "Basic for humans, perhaps," Lacey replied, her violet eyes studying him with new interest. "You're full of surprises, Michael Anderson." The way she said his name, rolling the syllables in her accented voice, sent an unexpected warmth through him that had nothing to do with the gradually rising temperature. "We should head back," he said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the confined space. "Taro will be worried." "The boy has attached himself to you quickly," Lacey observed, as they made their way through the now illuminated access tunnels. "It's unusual for Nevidian children to trust so readily, especially outsiders." "He's been through hell," Michael replied. "Sometimes trauma makes strange connections." Lacey nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you? You don't strike me as someone who typically takes in orphaned alien children." Michael was saved from answering by the chime of his emergency beacon. He pulled it from his pocket, staring at the blinking light with mixed emotions. "Your people?" Lacey asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Yeah," Michael confirmed. "Terran Alliance patrol ship. They've picked up my signal," and he paused and reading the scrolling text. "They'll be here in 3 days once the storm front passes." The news should have filled him with relief. 3 days and he'd be off this frozen rock, back to civilization, back to his life. Instead, he felt an unexpected heaviness. "That's good news," Lacey said, though her tone suggested otherwise. They reached the central hub to find a transformed atmosphere. Lights glowed warmly, heating systems hummed, and the previously fearful crowd now buzzed with relieved conversation. As they entered, heads turned. To Michael's surprise, several Nevidians approached to offer thanks. Elder Knox stood at the center, his expression sour but resigned. "The off-worlder has restored our power," he announced grudgingly. "We extend our gratitude." Michael nodded, scanning the room for Taro. He spotted the boy sitting with an older Nevidian woman who was feeding him something steaming from a bowl. "The boy has been fed and cared for," Elder Knox said, following Michael's gaze. "Now that the crisis is resolved, we can discuss his placement with a suitable family." "Placement?" Michael repeated, a sudden protectiveness surging through him. "He is orphaned. Our customs dictate." "I'm taking care of him," Michael interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. Elder Knox's brow ridges rose. "You? An off-worlder who will depart as soon as the storms allow?" The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He glanced down at his still blinking beacon, then back at Taro, who had spotted him and was now rushing across the room. "Michael! You came back!" the boy cried, throwing his small arms around Michael's legs. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Michael replied, ruffling the boy's white hair. Later that evening, with the settlement's power fully restored, Michael returned to his quarters with Taro. The boy fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's events. Michael sat in the darkness, staring at his beacon, turning it over and over in his hands. A soft knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Lacey standing there, holding a container of something that smelled spicy and warm. "Thought you might be hungry," she said. "It's traditional to offer food to those who've helped the community." "Is that the only tradition bringing you here?" Michael asked, surprising himself with his directness. Lacey's blue skin darkened slightly around her cheeks. A blush, he realized. "Among my people, saving lives creates a bond," she said, stepping inside as he moved aside. "And you saved many today." They ate together, talking in low voices to avoid waking Taro. Lacey told him about life on Icium, about the beauty beneath its harsh exterior. Michael found himself sharing stories of his own travels, missions he'd completed, worlds he'd seen. 3 days, Lacey said eventually, glancing at his beacon. Not much time. No, Michael agreed. Their eyes met across the small table, and something electric passed between them. In Nevidian culture, she said softly, we believe life is too precious and brief to waste time denying connection when it appears. She reached across the table, her blue fingers intertwining with his tanned ones. Her skin was cooler than a human's, but not unpleasantly so. The contrast sent a thrill through him. And what about human culture, she asked, her eyes holding his. We're adaptable, Michael replied, his voice rough with sudden desire. It's what makes us survive anywhere in the galaxy. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. Their bodies drew together like magnets, the differences in their physiology creating a fascinating tension. Her hands explored the muscles of his shoulders and back with undisguised appreciation. Your kind is so warm, she whispered against his neck, like carrying a sun inside you. That night, they discovered the universal language that transcended species. In the quiet darkness of his quarters, with Taro sleeping soundly across the room, Michael and Lacey found warmth that defied Icium's eternal winter. Their connection was passionate yet tender, both discovering and teaching in equal measure. Afterward, lying together in the dim light, Michael stared at the ceiling, his thoughts in turmoil. In 3 days, a ship would arrive to take him away from this place, from Taro, from Lacey. For the first time in years, Michael Anderson wasn't sure what path to take. Michael woke to the sound of Taro giggling. Opening his eyes, he found the boy sitting cross-legged on the floor, watching with fascination as Lacey demonstrated how to fold a piece of paper into an animal shape. An old Nevidian craft she called frost folding. Look, Michael, Taro exclaimed, holding up a crude paper creature. I made a snow crawler. Michael smiled, the domestic scene warming something inside him that had been cold for too long. Lacey caught his eye and returned the smile, a private moment passing between them that recalled their night together. The peaceful moment shattered at the harsh knock on the door. Elder Knox stood outside, flanked by 2 settlement guards and a thin, severe-looking Nevidian male in formal attire. Counselor Nex, Lacey whispered, her body tensing, the settlement's legal authority. Human, Elder Knox began without preamble, you have violated our most sacred laws. Michael straightened, instinctively moving to stand between the Nevidians and Taro. What laws? Interspecies fraternization without proper registration and ceremonial approval, Counselor V-Nex stated, consulting a tablet. An illegal guardianship claim over a Nevidian minor. That's ridiculous, Michael began, but Lacey placed a restraining hand on his arm. They're invoking ancient laws, Michael, she murmured, rarely enforced, but still valid. Furthermore, Elder Knox continued, his eyes narrowing at Taro, the boy's maternal uncle has arrived to claim guardianship. A tall Nevidian male stepped forward from behind the guards. His resemblance to Taro was subtle but unmistakable in the shape of his eyes and the set of his jaw. Uncle Dren, Taro whispered, shrinking back against Michael's leg. Hello, nephew, the newcomer said, his voice smooth as ice. I've come to take you home. I don't want to go with him, Taro said, his small fingers digging into Michael's pant leg. He was mean to Mother. Dren's expression hardened. Children say foolish things when traumatized. My sister's death and her daughter's were unfortunate accidents. Something in his tone raised Michael's hackles. Before he could respond, his emergency beacon chimed again, this time with an urgent priority signal. He pulled it out, reading the encrypted message with growing concern. Is there a problem, human? Elder Knox asked, not bothering to hide his satisfaction at Michael's obvious discomfort. My ship will arrive tomorrow. Not in 3 days, Michael replied, his mind racing. Storm's clearing faster than expected. And they're not just coming for me, they need me for an emergency operation. He scanned the rest of the message. Proxima collective vessels detected in Icium sector. Suspected advanced force for major incursion. Critical U-join counter operation. Specialized skills required. Respond immediately. The Proxima Collective, a hostile alien alliance that had been probing human territory for years. If they were moving into this sector, This changes nothing, Counselor Nex stated. Until your departure, you will respect our laws. The boy goes with his blood relative, and you will face sanctions for your indiscretion with this female. Lacey stepped forward, her posture defiant. I invoke the right of challenge under the old code. As the female involved, I have the right to contest these charges. The counselor's eyes widened. The old code hasn't been invoked in generations. Yet it remains law, Lacey countered, and I know my rights. A tense silence followed, broken by Dren's cold laugh. How touching! The Outworlder has defenders. He turned to Michael. But tell me, human, will you still be so interested in playing family when you learn what the boy truly is? What are you talking about? Michael demanded. My sister's children aren't ordinary Navidians, Dren said, his voice dropping. They carry a rare genetic marker, one that makes them valuable to certain interested parties. Like the Proxima Collective? Michael asked sharply, pieces suddenly falling into place. Dren's slight flinch confirmed Michael's suspicion. The timing was too convenient. The Collective's ships appearing, just as this mysterious uncle showed up to claim Taro. The boy stays with me until this is sorted out, Michael stated firmly, and I'm formally requesting temporary guardianship under Terran Alliance humanitarian protocols, which supersede local law when a child's safety is at risk. Elder Knox sputtered in outrage, but Counselor Nex looked uncertain. The Terran Alliance has no jurisdiction here. Actually, Michael interrupted, holding up his beacon, as a special operations officer responding to a level 1 threat, I can invoke emergency powers if I believe there's a connection to collective activity. It was stretching the truth, but not by much. This is preposterous, Elder Knox exclaimed. Perhaps, Counselor Nex said slowly, we should discuss this matter more privately. He glanced at Dren with new suspicion, especially if there are external interests involved. As the Navidians argued among themselves, Michael felt a tug on his sleeve. Taro looked up at him with frightened eyes. You won't let them take me, will you? He whispered. Michael knelt down to the boy's level. No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise. Lacey moved to stand beside them, her hand finding Michael's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. The warmth of her touch steadied him as his mind raced through options. He had less than 24 hours before his ship arrived. Less than 24 hours to unravel the truth about Taro's family, navigate alien laws, deal with Dren's suspicious claims, and somehow prepare for a military operation against the Collective. And somewhere in all that, he still had a promise to keep, a little girl waiting for a proper burial. The storm had temporarily abated, leaving a brief window of calm in the perpetual winter of Isium. Michael stood at the edge of a small clearing near the settlement's boundary, the preservation container holding Taro's sister cradled in his arms. Behind him, Taro and Lacey waited silently, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Is this place good? Michael asked softly. Taro nodded. Mother said the ice spirits live in places where the wind makes patterns in the snow. He pointed to the delicate swirls carved into the snowdrifts by the recent storm. They'll watch over Lena. Michael had used his combat suit's thermal tools to cut through the permafrost, creating a small but dignified grave. Now, as he prepared to fulfill his promise to Taro, the weight of the moment settled on him. In human tradition, he explained to Taro, we say words to honor those who have passed. Would you like to say something for your sister? Taro stepped forward, his small face solemn. Goodbye, Lena. I hope the ice spirits take care of you until Mother finds you. He looked up at Michael. Mother told me something before she went to the stars. She said our blood is special. It can talk to the ice. That's why Uncle Dren was always angry with her. Michael exchanged a glance with Lacey, whose expression had grown concerned. What do you mean your blood can talk to the ice? Lacey asked gently. Mother showed me once. She cut her finger and let a drop fall on ice, and it changed, made patterns like stars. Taro's voice dropped to a whisper. She said never to show anyone, especially not Uncle Dren. She said bad people would want to use it. Michael carefully placed the container in the grave. Taro, this is important. Did your mother ever mention people called the Proxima Collective? The boy's eyes widened. The Star Eaters? Mother said they'd take us away if they found us. As Michael covered the grave, his mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. Taro's genetic heritage, Dren's suspicious arrival, the collective's sudden interest in this sector. "We need to get back," Lacey said urgently. "The hearing under the old code begins at midday." Michael nodded, placing a hand-carved marker at the head of the grave. A simple wooden cross, a human tradition that seemed fitting for this moment where two cultures had intertwined. "Goodbye, Lena," he said softly. "Rest easy. Your brother is safe with us." As they walked back to the settlement, Taro between them holding both their hands, Michael's emergency beacon chimed again. The message was brief but alarming. Proxima advanced scouts confirmed in the settlement vicinity. Possible infiltration, exercise extreme caution, extraction ETA 18 hours. "We need to find proof of Dren's connection to the collective before the hearing," Michael murmured to Lacey. "And we need to keep Taro safe." "I know where to start," Lacey replied. "The settlement's communication logs. If Dren contacted anyone off-world." The central hall was already filling with Navidians when they arrived. The old code hearing had drawn nearly every resident, curious to witness a ceremony not performed in generations. Elder Knox presided from a raised platform, with Counselor Nex at his side. Dren stood to one side, his cold eyes following Taro's every movement. "Lacey of House Terrace," Elder Knox announced formally. "You have invoked the right of challenge under the old code. Step forward." Lacey squeezed Michael's hand before approaching the platform. She stood tall, her white braids gleaming in the hall's light. "The charges against you and the human are serious," Counselor Nex stated. "Interspecies fraternization without proper registration violates our most sacred traditions." "I challenge the validity of these charges," Lacey replied, her voice clear and strong. "The old code also states that in times of crisis, bonds formed in service to the community transcend traditional requirements." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elder Knox frowned. "You claim such a crisis existed?" "The settlement was without power, facing freezing temperatures," Lacey argued. "The human risked his life to restore our generators. By the old code's own measure, his service created a bond that supersedes the need for formal registration." While Lacey defended their relationship, Michael slipped his data pad to a young Navidian technician he'd befriended during the power restoration. The tech nodded slightly and disappeared toward the communication center. "Furthermore," Lacey continued, "I submit that these charges were brought not out of concern for our traditions, but as a pretext to separate the human from the boy Taro." "Preposterous," Dren interjected. "The boy is my blood. My claim is legitimate." "Is it?" Michael called out, stepping forward. "Then perhaps you can explain your communications with off-world entities in the Proxima sector." A hush fell over the hall. Dren's face darkened. "You dare accuse me?" "We have the logs," Michael bluffed, praying the technician would find something. "And we know about Taro's genetic heritage, the ability his bloodline has to manipulate ice at the molecular level." Elder Knox looked between them, confusion evident. "What is this about?" "The Proxima Collective has been searching for beings with natural terraforming abilities," Michael explained. "Taro and his sister carried a genetic trait that allows them to restructure ice at the molecular level, a trait that would be invaluable for a species looking to transform frozen worlds." Counselor Nex leaned forward. "These are serious accusations, human. Do you have proof?" As if on cue, the technician rushed back into the hall, datapad in hand. "Elder, I found encrypted transmissions from Dren's quarters to an unregistered ship in orbit. The encryption matches known Proxima patterns." Dren's composure cracked. With a snarl, he lunged toward Taro, who stood frozen in fear. Michael moved with military precision, intercepting Dren, throwing him to the ground. "You fool!" Dren spat. "The collective would have paid handsomely for the boy. His sister was too young, too weak. She couldn't survive the testing. But he's perfect." Gasps echoed through the hall as Dren's confession confirmed their worst fears. Guards rushed forward to restrain him. "The boy stays with us," Michael declared, pulling Taro protectively against him. Lacey hurried to their side, forming a protective circle around the child. Elder Knox stood, his expression grave. "In light of these revelations, the charges against Lacey and the human are dismissed." He looked at Michael with newfound respect. "It seems we owe you another debt, human." Michael's beacon chimed once more. The message chilled him. Proxima vessels entering atmosphere. Extraction timeline accelerated. Prepare for immediate evacuation. He looked at Lacey, then down at Taro. In less than a day, his life had become entangled with theirs in ways he never could have imagined. Now, with danger approaching, he faced an impossible choice. "They're coming," Michael announced grimly, showing his beacon to Elder Knox and Counselor Nex. 3 Proxima vessels entering Isium's atmosphere. My extraction team is accelerating their timeline, but they won't beat the collective here. The central hall erupted in panic. Nevidians rushed about, gathering belongings, children crying as parents tried to calm them. "We need to evacuate the settlement," Elder Knox declared, his previous hostility toward Michael forgotten in the face of a greater threat. "No time," Michael countered. "The collective will intercept anyone trying to flee across the ice. Our best chance is to make a stand here while setting a trap." He turned to the guards holding Dren. "We use him as bait. Make the collective think they can still get what they came for." Dren snarled. "You're insane. They'll kill me if they think I've failed." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," Michael replied coldly. He activated his combat suit systems, the gray steel plates humming to life as they powered up. "Lacey, get Taro somewhere safe." "No," Lacey said firmly. "We stay together." Michael opened his mouth to argue but was interrupted by his beacon's urgent chime. Commander Hayes, his superior officer, appeared in a small hologram. "Anderson, situation update. We're 10 minutes out, but Proxima forces will beat us there. You need to secure the genetic asset and prepare for immediate extraction. Sir, requesting permission to evacuate 2 Nevidian civilians along with the asset, the boy's guardian and—" "Negative, Anderson. This is a military extraction in a hostile territory. No non-essential personnel." Michael's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, the asset is a 5-year-old boy who won't cooperate without his guardian, and the woman has critical intelligence on Proxima operations in this sector." Hayes' holographic face showed clear irritation. "You're pushing it, Anderson." "Humanity first, sir," Michael replied, invoking the unofficial motto of Terran Special Forces. "We don't leave allies behind." A tense silence followed before Hayes grudgingly nodded. "On your head, Anderson. Be ready for extraction in 15 minutes. Hayes out." As the hologram disappeared, the settlement's alarms began to wail. Through the viewports, 3 dark shapes descended through Isium's cloud cover. Proxima dropships. "We need to move now," Michael ordered. "Counselor, take half the guards and secure the north entrance. Elder, get everyone else to the emergency shelters beneath the central hub." To his surprise, both Nevidians nodded without argument. Michael turned to the guards holding Dren. "Bring him to the communication center. Make it look like he's sending a signal to the collective." Lacey approached, Taro's hand firmly in hers. "What's the plan?" "We make the collective think Dren has Taro ready for handover. When they come in, my team hits them from orbit with targeted strikes. But we need to be at the extraction point when that happens." A tremendous boom shook the settlement as the first Proxima ship landed outside the perimeter. Michael's combat training took over, his movements precise and efficient as he checked his weapons. "Michael," Taro said suddenly, his small voice cutting through the chaos. "I can help." "Not now, kid. We need to—" "I can talk to the ice," Taro insisted, "like Mother showed me." Michael and Lacey exchanged glances. "Taro, that's too dangerous," Lacey began. "But I want to help," the boy protested. "They hurt Lena." "They hurt Mother." Before either adult could stop him, Taro broke away and ran to the nearest viewport. He pressed his small blue hand against the glass, then bit his finger hard enough to draw blood. A drop of deep indigo blood smeared against the transparent surface. What happened next defied explanation. The blood droplet seemed to pulse, sending ripples through the viewport's material. Outside, the ice covering the settlement's exterior began to shift, crystalline structures growing and changing at impossible speeds. "Holy shit," Michael breathed as massive ice spikes erupted from the ground around the landed Proxima ship, impaling its hull in multiple places. Taro turned, his violet eyes glowing with an inner light. "I told you I could help." The settlement shook again as the remaining Proxima ships opened fire, trying to clear a landing zone. Michael scooped Taro into his arms. "That was amazing, kid, but we need to move." Now, they raced through the corridors toward the designated extraction point, Lacey keeping pace beside them. Behind them, they heard the distinctive sound of Proxima boarding cutters slicing through the settlement's outer walls. "They're inside," Lacey gasped. "Almost there," Michael encouraged, his combat suit's enhanced strength allowing him to carry Taro without slowing. They burst into the settlement's small hangar bay, just as the first Proxima soldiers, tall insectoid creatures with chitinous armor, entered from the opposite side. Michael set Taro down behind a cargo container and drew his sidearm. "Stay down," he ordered, then opened fire. The Proxima soldiers scattered, returning fire with energy weapons that scorched the hangar walls. Michael's military training gave him an edge, his shots finding gaps in the alien's armor, while he used the environment for cover. Suddenly, Taro cried out. Michael turned to see the boy staring in horror as a Proxima soldier advanced on their position from a side entrance. Before Michael could shift his aim, Lacey threw herself at the creature, a metal pipe in her hands. The alien swatted her aside with terrifying strength, sending her crashing into a stack of crates. As it turned its attention back to Taro, Michael felt a rage unlike anything he'd experienced before. With a roar that seemed to channel every human warrior who had ever fought to protect those they loved, Michael charged. His combat suit amplified his strength as he slammed into the alien, driving it backward. They crashed through equipment, Michael's fists hammering against the creature's armored carapace. "You don't touch my family." Each word was punctuated by a devastating blow. The alien finally went still beneath him. Michael turned to find Lacey already recovering, helping Taro to his feet. Their eyes met across the hangar, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. In the chaos of battle, a truth had crystallized. They had become a family. The ceiling of the hangar suddenly retracted, revealing the sleek form of a Terran Alliance dropship descending through the opening. Commander Hayes' voice boomed over the comms. "Anderson! Status?" "3 for extraction," Michael called back. "The boy, the woman, and myself." As the dropship settled on the hangar floor, its weapon systems targeting the remaining Proxima forces, Michael pulled Lacey and Taro close. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, his eyes locked with Lacey's, "we face it together." Her blue fingers intertwined with his. "Together," she agreed. "Absolutely not," Michael stated firmly, standing at attention in Commander Hayes' office aboard the Terran Alliance cruiser Dauntless. "Taro is a child, not a weapon." 3 days had passed since their narrow escape from Elysium. The Proxima forces had been repelled by the combined efforts of the Terran fleet and, surprisingly, a contingent of Navidian fighters who had arrived to defend their settlement. Now orbiting safely above the planet, Michael faced a different battle. Commander Hayes sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Anderson, be reasonable. The boy's abilities could revolutionize our terraforming capabilities. Think of the frozen worlds we could make habitable." "I am thinking about that," Michael replied. "I'm also thinking about a 5-year-old who's lost his entire family and deserves a childhood." Hayes gestured to the datapad on his desk. "The research division is proposing a comfortable facility on New Terra. He'd have the best care, education, and a team of scientists studying him like a lab specimen," Michael interrupted. "Sir, with respect, that's not happening." The commander studied him for a long moment. "You've changed, Anderson. The soldier I knew 6 months ago wouldn't have blinked at following orders." "The soldier you knew 6 months ago hadn't been asked by a little boy to bury his sister," Michael said quietly. "Sometimes it takes seeing the galaxy through someone else's eyes to understand what really matters." A knock at the door interrupted them. And Admiral De Leon, commander of the Terran Alliance's diplomatic corps, entered with Lacey at his side. She wore a formal Navidian robe, but had adapted it with elements of Terran styling, a small but meaningful fusion of their cultures. "Commander Hayes," the Admiral nodded, "I believe we have a solution to our situation." Hayes stood. "Admiral, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow's briefing." "Plans change," Dalian replied with a small smile, "especially when faced with an opportunity like this one." He gestured to Lacey. Ms. Terrace has made a compelling proposal on behalf of the Navidian High Council. Lacey stepped forward, her posture confident despite being surrounded by Terran military brass. The events on Icium have made it clear that our peoples need stronger cooperation against threats like the Proxima Collective. The Council is proposing a permanent Terran diplomatic presence on Icium with a joint research initiative into sustainable ice-world habitation. Michael caught her eye, seeing the hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Admiral Dalion continued, "We need someone who understands both cultures, someone who's earned the trust of the Navidian people." He turned to Michael. "Someone like you, Major Anderson?" "Major?" Michael questioned. "Field promotion," Hayes muttered. "The Admiral's idea." "Along with a transfer to Diplomatic Corps," Dalion added, "unless you'd prefer to remain under Commander Hayes's enlightened leadership." Michael fought to keep his expression neutral. "And Taro?" "The boy would remain with his legal guardian," Dalion replied, "which I understand is now officially Ms. Taurus, with your name listed as co-guardian under the new Terran-Navidian family accord we've just drafted." Hayes looked like he'd bitten into something sour. "This is highly irregular, Admiral." "So is finding a human Special Forces officer who's managed to forge an alliance with a previously isolationist species, adopt an alien child, and thwart a Proxima incursion all in the span of a week," De Leon countered. "I'd call that the kind of irregular we need more of." 2 hours later, Michael stood at the viewport of his new quarters aboard the Dauntless, watching Icium rotate slowly below. Lacey joined him, slipping her hand into his. "You planned this," he said, not a question but an observation. "I may have had a few conversations with the Admiral during our journey," she admitted with a mischievous smile. "Navidians can be quite persuasive when motivated." "And what exactly motivated you?" Michael asked, turning to face her. Lacey's fingers traced the contours of his face. "Perhaps I wasn't ready to say goodbye to the human who buried a little girl with dignity and saved her brother with compassion." Their lips met in a kiss that bridged worlds, different temperatures, different biologies, but a shared understanding that transcended both. "Where's Taro?" Michael asked when they finally parted. "Charming the engineering crew," Lacey laughed. "He's convinced them to let him help repair one of the shuttles. I think half the human crew has adopted him already." Michael shook his head, smiling. "That kid's going to be running the Alliance by the time he's 20. "As long as we're there to guide him," Lacey said softly. A chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Taro, his white hair disheveled and his blue face smudged with engine grease. "Michael! The engineers showed me how the plasma converters work. Can we have one at our new home?" Absolutely not," Michael replied, trying to sound stern but failing miserably. "And wash your face before dinner." Taro grinned and scampered off to the adjoining bathroom. "Our new home," Lacey repeated thoughtfully. "The diplomatic residence on Icium is quite spacious, I'm told." "Big enough for 3? Michael asked. "Perhaps eventually more," she suggested, her violet eyes holding his with meaningful intensity. The implication sent a pleasant warmth through Michael. The idea of a family, something he'd never seriously considered during his military career, now felt not just possible, but right. "I need to return to Icium tomorrow to help coordinate the settlement's rebuilding," Lacey said. "Elder Knox has requested your presence as well. He wants to formally thank the human who helped save their people." "The same human he wanted to throw out a week ago?" Michael laughed. "We Navidians can change our minds when presented with compelling evidence," she replied, sliding her arms around his waist. "And you've been very compelling." Their moment was interrupted by Taro bounding back into the room, face clean, but somehow having acquired a Terran Alliance cadet cap that sat comically large on his small head. "Lieutenant Kim gave me this. He said I'm an honorary human now." Michael knelt down to the boy's level. "You know, being human isn't about what you look like or where you're from. It's about what you do when someone needs help." Taro considered this seriously. "Like when you helped me bury Lena?" "Exactly like that," Michael confirmed, his throat tightening with emotion. "Then I think you're the most human person ever," Taro declared, with a child's perfect sincerity. That night, with Taro asleep in his new room, and the stars of an alien sky visible through the viewport, Michael and Lacey found each other again. Their passion was tempered with tenderness, their differences becoming complementary rather than divisive. In the warm aftermath, Michael realized how far he'd come from the isolated soldier who had landed on Elysium. "What are you thinking?" Lacey murmured against his chest. Michael smiled in the darkness. "I'm thinking about a little boy who asked me to bury his sister, and everything that came after. And are you glad about what came next?" Michael pulled her closer, his answer requiring no words at all. 6 months later, Michael stood again at the grave of Taro's sister. The simple marker he'd placed had been joined by a traditional Nevidian ice sculpture that would never melt, thanks to Taro's emerging abilities. Beside it stood a Terran oak sapling, specially engineered to thrive in Elysium's harsh climate, a living symbol of the union between their worlds. Lacey and Tara waited a respectful distance away as Michael placed a small carved figure beside the grave, a human tradition for remembering the departed. "She brought us together," Lacey said softly when he rejoined them. "In her own way." Michael nodded, taking her hand in his and resting his other hand on Taro's shoulder. Together they walked back toward the settlement, now a thriving Terran Nevidian outpost where the diplomatic residence stood as a beacon of cooperation. What had begun with a simple, heartbreaking request from a child had transformed into something none of them could have imagined. A family forged across stars, a home built between worlds, in a future bright with possibility.